Hi, Tatiana. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here, Whitney. Thank you for having me.
Me too. And just so we can catch up the listeners, I had the pleasure of being a guest on your podcast called Bedside. And
Yes.
I just loved talking to you. You asked the best questions, but I was left wanting so much more from you. Like you have such a depth of knowledge about the bedside, about manifestation, about what we were just chatting about, the interconnectedness of manifestation and sex and partnership and all these topics that I haven't yet explored here on the High Vibration Living podcast. So that's what I wanted to get into with you.
I'm so excited. Where do we begin, Whitney? There's so many places to start with this. I feel like maybe a good place would be for me to kind of chat a little bit about bedsiding. I guess kind of like you mentioned, really this interconnection between manifestation, our desires, our sexual intimacy. So I really started the Bedside show, which everybody here listening, you have to go check out our interview with Whitney. It was such a fun one. And I really started the show because I felt like so many people were skirting around the conversation of intimacy and sex. And I think it really began with a bit of a lack of I went back to kind of my teenagehood being like, I did not get the right sex education, the right tools, the right conversations around one of the most important facets, most important high vibration living components of who we are, which is our sexuality, our sexual expression. Like it is an entire chakra point in our body that is just so deeply intuitive. It's who we are. It is where we find our authenticity. It's where we connect to our deepest selves. And it's so much more than just like the physical act of sex. And so I was so curious to explore conversations really around this topic and have experts and leaders and educators and just people who were in even just like the wellness community to chat more about like how intimacy and desire lives and permeates throughout our lives and really kind of break down so many walls around that. And what I really came down to in kind of doing this work for quite some time was this root of desire that we all innately have. And so many of us kind of sever our connection to desire at a really early age. Many of us are actually conditioned out of it. Going back to our sex education systems, going back to, how you were raised, right? A lot of us, especially women, can relate to learning to kind of cut off our desires early on for the expectations of others, to kind of leave ourselves at the door to put other people first, right? And we're taught that that is a selfless act. We're taught that that is the right thing to do. But in fact, it is really what I think ends up over time. And so many people kind of find themselves maybe in their later 20s or whenever, their 30s, 40s, whenever, being like, wait, holy shit, when did I stop living for myself? What just happened, right? And it's almost like kind of this moment that many of us hit, being like, oh my gosh, I have been living so disconnected for so long. And maybe it's showing up in your sex life. Maybe it's showing up in the way you're relating to people. Maybe it's showing up in your career, right? And so I got really passionate about trying to figure out really where and how we can begin to reconnect to our desires and how we can do it in a really uncomplicated way and how we can do it in a very kind of non-threatening way, right? I think a lot of when I came into the sex and intimacy space, it felt so like, it almost felt too much for me. I was like, oh, I feel very overwhelmed by kind of what is being offered to me because this is not, how I see myself in this category, right? Like I felt like, I feel really normal in my sex life. It's not, I'm not seeking crazy kink. I'm not right. Though that's such an amazing thing to explore. But I think I was like, I didn't find myself even in a lot of the categories. So I wanted to really break it down in a simple way that felt super approachable. And so when it came down to really this concept of a desire, I developed this idea of a pleasure practice, which is basically, and this kind of links to manifestation. We'll get to this in a bit. But the concept of a pleasure practice, really in its simplest form, is asking yourself, what's one thing that you can do for yourself today in the name of desire, in the name of joy, in the name of ease, right? And it's bringing back this ritual and this practice of getting into your intuition, of getting back into what you crave, actually asking yourself, kind of tuning down, quieting down all the noise, because we can get so, into other people's worlds, scrolling on our feeds, trying to mimic, what other people who inspire us are doing, almost kind of living in imprints of other people's lives. And the pleasure practice is really getting you back into your intuition, your desire, your frequency, what you're calling in. And it sounds so simple, but our lives are so filled with so many else's, so much of everyone else's wants and needs and deadlines, and show up to this meeting and 9 to 5, right? And by the end of the day, you're like, have I done anything for myself? And so really the idea of the pleasure practice is getting back into this intuition of what can I do for myself? How can I carve out a little bit of time for me in the spaces in between? And that really led to a lot of even just the work I've created around manifestation, really, which is that, how can we actually hone into our desires more? What does that look like when we step into that? And then what does that mean to actually visualize, align, and attract to those desires, to our biggest goals, to our biggest manifestations? And yeah, it just lights me up. It's such a juicy, fun topic to get into. But that's just, I think, a little bit about really that pain point that I feel like I'm trying to solve, which is that we're all so deeply deserving of all our desires and our wants. And how can we actually break that down into something really simple and tangible to achieve?
And you brought up something that I was going to be asking you about today, is when we get there to those points in our life where we don't even know what we want to manifest. So that time, when we're around a dinner table and people are asking you, like, what do you want? And you go blank, you realize you don't even know. And I see now that it's connected to pleasure, personal desire. I think often when we think about manifestation, we think about what other people's vision boards must look like. What other people's Instagram feeds what look like, what other people are saying and claiming on social media that they want their life to be like a Nancy Meyers movie or whatever the trend is. But then you're like, no, but wait, like, what do I actually want? And I think you're bringing up a good thing, like, what lights us up? What's the pleasure? What's the pleasure that we're getting from little experiences throughout our day that can help us and guide us, I think, in those blank moments when we're trying to think, what do I want to manifest? What do I want to call in next? And this is kind of like a great time of the year. Summer is a great time to like just reconsider, what do I want? And what do I want the rest of the season of the year to look like? Fall and December, which I kind of think are like great season. Well, all seasons are great for intimacy, but like fall and winter are like
cozy
intimacy seasons. It's so interesting. I'm really seeing the connection now between pleasure, intimacy, and manifestation like I've never seen before, just through our brief conversation so far.
Yeah. And I think, Whitney, like, thank you for seeing that and kind of extracting that so well, because I think, kind of to answer your question for the person who might be sitting there thinking, yeah, what do I want to manifest? And you reminded me this of kind of being in the season of summer itself. Really, the idea is to get back into the energetic of play, right? Like, to strip everything back. When you get into energetic of play, you're really following that experimental, adventurous sense of being. You're following kind of a path that is a bit unknown, could lead you somewhere fun, could be something that maybe you want to, stop and move on to something else. And I think the energy of play is so much fun because we get to go back to maybe the things that used to excite us years ago or growing up as a kid, right? I know I personally love kind of doing collages and vision boarding. And when I think back to it, I'm like, yeah, I always was that kid with kind of like carrying a little bucket of crayons everywhere and like their scissors and glue stick, right? Like creativity was always at my fingertips in that sense. And what does that mean in maybe more of my adult form? And so taking the pressure off a bit of the what and the how and the like definitive, this is what I'm calling in, and actually kind of taking a step back and being like, let's actually just play. play. Let's be in the energetic of play. Let's be in the energetic of receiving and experimenting, seeing what we like. Most importantly, seeing what we don't like. I find, that is always the best detour in the right direction. You're like, okay, great. Actually don't love doing that. Don't love showing up this way. Don't love dating people like this, or, having, some date nights on this night, right? Like learning, right, what it is that works actually for you. And I'm totally laughing to myself because it's just so true. There's always just something trending on TikTok or Instagram or some sort of aesthetic. You made me laugh really hard with the Nancy Meyers, because it's like, am I into that? And you should kind of think of for a moment and be like, this might not actually even be me. You can respect it, but is that actually your authentic expression?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love when you find yourself in those moments and it's kind of unclear what you want. But then I feel like when you start to ask yourself that question, it naturally will start to kind of bubble up over the next few days after that. So I'd love to know, like, do you have a morning and evening routine right now that somehow includes manifestation or getting clear on how you want to start your day, how you want to close your day, what you want to call in for the week?
Yes. Oh my God, do I have a routine? I really love rituals. I find that when I just have a loose framework, it allows me actually the ultimate freedom. When I just have like a blank page, it almost kind of like paralyzes me. I'm like, what am I filling my time with? And so I find, to speak a little bit to masculine and feminine energetics, a lot of people talk how they really want to be kind of in this flow state and be in very like this feminine energy. And I find that to actually be in your ultimate feminine energetic, it's most supportive to have maybe that masculine container, that masculine framework that allows yourself to kind of play within that space and time. So rituals are my favorite thing. I developed the monthly manifestation journal for this very reason, to just have a light framework that allows yourself to really get into the flexibility of what rituals you want to build for yourself. So I'm really, really big on visualizing. So really, I think one of the keys to manifestation is being it before you become it, right? Let's say, I want to break this down in a very tangible way. Let's say that you are calling in a partner. You are calling in someone that you are wanting to date, right? And Anna Grace, I think you've had her on your podcast. She explained this so well to me once, where she was like, everybody has this higher timeline. It's your highest self. It's you achieving all of the things that you could have ever possibly wanted to achieve. And she's like, throughout your day, you're always hitting that timeline at little bits and moments. But you have to intentionally kind of retune to that, right? And I almost see that high timeline as like a radio frequency channel. Let's call it like channel 99.9. Let's get back to like radio station days. So that is your highest timeline. And when you're wanting to kind of calibrate to that, maybe we're hanging out at an 89.9, but right, we have to tune our tuners to almost hit that level, that frequency. And so through ritual and through really this visualization process, and I'll get back to kind of our example of calling in a partner, right? We have to almost tune and match that. So who do we want to be so that we can become that version of self that's ready to call in that partner, that's deserving of that partner, right? We already are innately deserving, inherently always deserving of what we want in our desires. But how do we match that frequency? And so that is really the kind of crux of what I do every single day. My rituals always come back to, who am I being so that I can become that version of self, right? I might not feel that way yet, but who's the version of self that's calling in that partner, right? How are they showing up? How are they dressing? How are they socializing? How are they, moving their body? How are they just showing up in the world, in public, at the grocery store, right? Like these little things that I think tether us back to who we know we innately are. And really to match kind of that highest level of energetics. So every morning, my morning rituals look like I do about like 10 or 15 minutes of meditating. I do a lot of, it's really whatever I'm needing. Sometimes I just need to kind of like recalibrate my energy, calm my nervous system. Lately, I've been doing a ton of kind of higher self visualizations, really stepping into that creator archetype. And kind of that gives myself that pep talk of really showing up for myself in the right way. And then I back into pleasure practices, like I mentioned earlier, of what are the pleasure practices that I want to do today that this version of self is. And so maybe that's showing up to an early morning Pilates class before I podcast. Maybe that is getting in a morning walk or some steps. Maybe that is taking some time to just make myself a really, really delicious matcha. Maybe it's kind of putting down the t-shirt I've worn for 3 days in a row and getting my clothes from the dry cleaner and putting on that amazing shirt that I love and styling a really fun outfit. And so or planning drinks with friends later because I'm feeling flirty and fun and I'm in my ovulation phase, right? And so I think just leaning into that has been such a fun practice. And actually in the journal, there are daily pages that help you list out these pleasure practices, list out your to-do lists and who that archetype is that you've crafted for yourself that month, that you're embodying that day. But this is something you don't even need the manifestation journal to do that. Like you know, you can whip out your own piece of paper, you can create your own rituals around this. But I find that that is the best, like, secret sauce for my day. It just sets the entire tone and the foundation for how I want to show up.
And when you're visualizing what you want your life to move into, do you visualize 3 months out, 6 months out? Like, what's your timeline? And is there a timeline? Or is it just imagining a dream day or a dream week and how life and business would look like that for you?
Yeah, well, I love the idea of visualizing and journaling out a dream day. It's so much fun. I've done that exercise before. So anyone listening, I just highly recommend doing that. It's really fun to be like, what does a dream Saturday look like for me? Just to kind of like tap into all the fun and the play of it. But I really work in monthly timelines, Whitney. I realized that I found myself time and time again hitting such an extreme level of burnout by trying to fit myself into this system of the annual calendar. Like every time January 1 rolled around, I was like, every part of me was like constricting, and it just was like, you know, I'd set all these amazing goals and reflect on all of, you know, the different categories of my life. But, you know, 3 months later, it would feel like the most overwhelming task at hand. And I feel as though that was almost me hitting up against the wall of me feeling capable of achieving my desires, of being like, oh my God, I want these things so badly. They feel so big and unattainable. And how am I going to possibly do with this? It felt like the impossible task at hand. And so what I decided to do was really back into a lot of my learnings around sex and intimacy and the cyclical natures of our cycle. I'm so into the practice of cycle syncing and really, really intuitively working with my body at the different phases of every month. And I thought to myself, there is magic in the 28-day cycle. Whether or not you're listening and you're a menstruator or not, there is still magic in the 28-day cycle. It's the infradian rhythm is what it's called. And this really kind of debunks the circadian system, which is the 24-hour cycle, the go, 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 get it done at all costs, girl bossing too close to the sun kind of energy. And I just was like, let me actually back into something that feels so much more attainable, so much more relaxed, right? Like, what is the rush? What is the pressure? What is the just craziness that we're putting on ourselves? And I really was like, let's get into a system that has an intuitive flow, that works in the cycle of nature, in literally a moon cycle, and allow ourselves the freedom of just embodying, right? You would ask me, how do I visualize? I create a word for the month every single month. It's pretty simple as that, right? I personally love to add little vision boards. I kind of add my own flair. The manifestation system kind of has its own little flair to it, but really, like, at the stripped back, I really just create a word for the month. Like, who am I embodying this month? And from there, I'm able to kind of back in all these amazing pleasure practices, all of these amazing ways of me following my joy, listing out things that are lighting me up and things that I've been wanting to achieve. I still do set annual goals, but the beauty of it is that I don't put pressure on myself to get it done Jan 1. Like I allow myself to see that list and say, sometimes intuitively, like springtime will roll around and I'll be like, now is the perfect time to like do that newsletter I've always wanted to launch, right? Or whatever it might be. And so it allows me to kind of like be in the piece of it. And it's not like everything that I write down for the month needs to get done, but I allow myself at the end of the month to take inventory and say to myself, okay, I put this fun manifestation at the top of my list in June, whatever it might be. And if it didn't get done, I get to ask myself, is this something I still want? Or is it something that I want to let go of? And if I want to let go of it, like I tried, I thought about it. I mulled it over. Maybe it just wasn't in alignment. Maybe it was because I saw someone else online doing it and I wanted to try it and then realized it wasn't true for me, right? Or I get to say to myself, I didn't really have enough time or energy for this at this point in time. I'm going to put a pin in this. I'll move it to next month. Or I'm just going to put a pin in this and move it to a different season. And so that allows me to have a little, so much more flexibility and breadth in really what I'm doing. And less of that rigidity of getting it done immediately and putting way too many things on our plate that is so unnecessary.
Yeah, absolutely. So you brought up two things I want to know about just to give people the ability to kind of wrap their head around it. What is your word for the month? And like, what is lighting you up right now?
Let me tell you. I'm flipping open my own journal because I want to give you the exact right word. Okay. Oh, that was last month's. It is. Oh, I'm in the wrong month. Sorry, Whitney. Give me a second.
No, it's all good.
Oh, come on. There's so many pages in here that I'm like, where did I mark this? I want to give you the right one. You can cut this out, by the way. We'll just jump right to it. Okay. So my word for the month is free-spirited magnetic light. That is my word for July.
Wow.
And basically,
which supports you in feeling free-spirited and magnetic light.
So I really wanted to embrace for this particular month just being in the beauty of summer, just being in that spontaneity of the month and just the height of feeling just like, we've made it. We've made it to summertime. We just embodying that energy and really then kind of having this level of magnetism. Like I want to walk in rooms and spaces and be that magnetic light. And I want to calibrate my energy every day to that magnetism and kind of seeing the brightness in what sometimes can be like the mud. And so that has been so much fun for this month. And really, it's great because a few of my mantras this month has been presence is peace, staying at a bird's eye view. I really love the idea of like I mentioned, like kind of like soaring above it all and seeing things a little bit more clearly. And then another one is being unbothered, not letting little things get in the way. So that is my word for July.
I love that. And I think you chose a great thing with the being unbothered. I feel like when it is summer and it's hot and it's sticky, people can tend to get internally hot, right? Their fire is really fired up. So being unbothered by other people's reactions, especially at this time of year, is just a great reminder just to stay in your own high vibration bubble.
Yep, 100%.
Are there particular things in your life right now or in your day to day or that you're reading about or researching about that's like just really lighting you up? Like what are you really into at the moment?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. You know what we can kind of like get into, which I think is so related to really what you speak about with food, is that one of the things that's really lighting me up has been getting so into my own hormonal wellness through nutrition. So I
Mhm.
recently got, I would say in April it was, I had got some lab work done that I already had that intuitive hit that I was like, I find that I feel there is some sort of imbalance within my body. I was experiencing a bit
Yeah.
of, unexpected weight gain. I was experiencing a bit of hormonal acne, just kind of things that I was like, I know something is up. I was having painful cycles, and it's something that I had chipped away a year prior. I had really healed my hormonal acne through nutrition. But there was kind of that last lingering component. There always is. Where I was like, you know what? I really have a feeling that the way that my body is reacting to certain foods is not how it used to react. And I think that comes also from a deep level of intuition of really knowing when your system feels super good and maybe when it feels like something's a little bit off. So I got
Yeah.
some lab work done that hinted at, and I had a feeling, and it hinted at a bit of insulin resistance. And it is because I years prior, and I would kind of say, honestly, it was like pretty much lingering from the pandemic, had been dealing with a lot of high level stress. This is also before I got into this monthly manifestation system, you guys. Like it literally saved my health because I was spiking my cortisol so much. I was like running to the freaking ground. And because of that chronic level of stress, it truly ended up influencing how my body processed food, how it took in and started like churning really what I was eating
Mhm.
into sugars and making me a little bit insulin resistant. So it's something that I caught really, really early, but something that is so lighting me up right now. And I would say for the past 5 months or since April, however long it's been, I really have 180'd that entire aspect of my life. I popped in just for fun, just for science. I popped in a glucose monitor just to kind of get an idea of what were the foods that were really, really triggering me and giving me these
Yeah.
crazy spikes. And learning through kind of that data, what foods felt good and what weren't working for me. So I would say the thing that I've just been like chomping my teeth into, and that has been lighting me up so much, is this level of nourishment that has truly transformed how I would say feel from the inside out. And it's so interesting because the way I lead my life is almost, when it comes to the body, is almost like doing it for the internal first, and then the external shows, whether it's through your energy, whether it's through, I don't know, physical shifts and changes in body recompositions. And so it's been so exciting to kind of witness, when I take that time to nourish and be intentional like that, the shifts follow. Those come organically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You become more magnetic because you
Yeah.
feel so good
Yeah.
that, everything just starts flowing without you pushing anymore. And I always think about that. One of my first spiritual teachers that I met right before I sent in my application to go to culinary school, I met them on a plane flight to Hong Kong.
Cool.
And I kept in touch with them after the flight, and he was a great spiritual teacher for me. And I remember him showing me using his hands. So if you guys can get on YouTube and look at this video, I think it'll help you process the idea of pushing instead of flowing with life. But he kept showing this visual of me being the fist and life being this like wall. And I'm constantly pushing, trying to make my life happen instead of allowing it to happen.
Mm.
I'm pushing with the grind of my daily schedule and all the things I'm trying to get done instead of flowing with what I can get done and surrendering to what I can't. And then allowing myself to magnetically attract the things that are right for me throughout the day. And so whenever I get back into that routine, that stress, I feel my cortisol rising, I feel my diet getting out of balance, I feel my life getting out of balance. I remember, am I pushing? Am I trying to make things
Mm.
happen before they're happen? And do I just need to get back to the joy of my days and know that the phone calls, the texts, the emails, the business opportunities, the life opportunities, the lunch dates, it all start coming and flowing back to me without me pushing to try to make it happen.
Yes, I
And I'm telling
love
you,
this.
like,
Go ahead.
yeah, before we got on to this recording, like this is very much just also where I am personally right now. It's like, where have I been pushing and how can I create more magnetism so I just flow again? You know, we know it. We can feel it. And that's the really neat thing about men and women is we tend to feel and sense things before they happen. You know, men don't do that so much. They tend to react afterwards. We'll react beforehand. So we can start to get super sensitive and sad or excited about things that haven't even happened yet. It's a really fascinating thing about the female physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental intuition.
It's so
And
beautiful.
maybe, yeah,
And I think too, just to riff off what you were saying, you know, it's less of this idea, and you were hinting at this, you know, this is what you practice, I can tell as well, where it's less of this idea of being perfect all the time, of having the right routines and, you know, showing up perfectly and, you know, without error. It's really this idea, and this is what I've learned from so many sex educators and, you know, relationship experts coming on the show, is really this idea of the ebb and flow, and can you recalibrate? Can you get back to where you were, right? We can lean in and flow with the seasons of our lives. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect all the time, or sometimes we're in maybe stickier season than the previous, but right, it's all about how can you come back to that baseline that you know yourself as. And, you know, I think that's really kind of the mindful, beautiful practice of life, of really just constantly the ebb and flow and coming back and coming back and coming back and coming
I
back.
love that. Well, can you share maybe, let me reframe them. What has been some of the hardest questions you've asked sex experts that have come on your podcast? But by moving through those hard questions, you got really rewarding answers.
Mm. Um, you know what's really cool is that so many of the people, the sex therapists specifically that I have on the show, it's like you can ask them any question, they won't even bat an eye. And that's like from their training, you know, they like they don't think anything is out of left field. So it's tough to fool them. But I would say that some of my favorite questions that I've been able to ask some of these experts, particularly because they're seeing so much of the population, and really they've helped to normalize that every single one of us deals with kind of these things in our lives, has been really around a lot of the inner workings of being in longer term relationships, whether it be, you know, this idea of mismatched libidos, or being in a season where maybe your partner isn't wanting as much sex as you're wanting, or, you know, getting to the heart of really, you know, how many times a week should we be having sex, quote unquote, and connecting and being intimate. And so I love asking these questions and getting to the root of the answer, because it makes us all feel so much less alone. And I think it's the things that a lot of us think about secretly, and we don't even have the guts to mention it to our girlfriends. And so those are my favorite
Yeah.
questions to ask, because it's like no one wants to, you know, come off as something might be different for them or work differently for them, or their beat might be different than someone else's beat. And I think that, you know, there can be a lot of shame at the root of that. So those are truly my
Yeah.
favorite questions to get to the like bottom of.
Has there been any questions that your girlfriends have asked you recently that really surprised you about sex, that they came to you because they know that you've connected with so many experts and they were hoping that you could reveal the answer for them?
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk to me about like, oh, how much sex are you having each week? Especially if it comes down to if people are in longer term relationships, right? I think a lot of my friends will maybe come to me being like, hey, we used to maybe connect more frequently and I don't know what's up. And so I find that the best kind of tip and advice I really have around it is very much just this education around, you know, the honeymoon phase of a relationship is really fun. It's like these high highs, and I think people chase that. And then when that inevitably ends, they're like, oh, that phase of the relationship was so good. How do I get back to that? And my answer to that is the honeymoon phase is so much fun, but it's almost this wild roller coaster that feels a little bit manic. It's like, what's going on? We're like feeling all these amazing feel good hormones. And I think what is so beautiful is the deeper you are in relationship, this can even be in friendship too, guys, not even just sex, but speaking specifically to intimate relationships right now, I find that what you can create your sex life to becomes so much richer and deeper and so rooted in a foundation that you create with someone else. And you can create kind of those amazing moments. And so I find that a lot of what I talk to my friends about is, okay, I know you had so much fun in your honeymoon phase. Don't feel like it just ended and came crashing down to like a rock bottom. In fact, now is time to build this amazing foundation for yourselves about what a beautiful, deep, rich, intimate life can look like. And that is something that's defined and created by the two of you. And it takes conversations. It takes just kind of being like point blank, chatting over dinner, being like, okay, let's take a quick moment to talk about our sex life. What do you want it to look like? What feels connecting to you, right? Each week, if we were to like connect, what does a good frequency feel like to you? I find myself having conversations even with my partner a lot, being like, hey, we do a lot of just check-ins. We usually do it about like once a month or every other month of just being like, how are we? How have we been feeling? Sometimes we're in a season where we're both after so many other exterior things that we're not prioritizing maybe our relationship as much as we did the previous month. That's okay. But I think just acknowledging, hey, I'm going through it a bit right now. Maybe I won't be like as intimately available. And intimacy can be in so many different ways: physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, romantic intimacy, platonic intimacy, right? There's so many different ways that we can connect on intimate levels that don't actually need to necessarily be sex. So yeah, I find myself just chatting with friends a lot about this, and just kind of resetting the standard that I think failed us in terms of sex ed. I know I keep going back to sex ed, but like these weird expectations and sexpectations that have been presented in movies and just culture and media are so deeply I don't want to say wrong, but they're so one-sided, and there's so much more nuance to our intimate lives.
Very much more nuance in our intimate lives than obviously what leads on in movies and TV shows, but that's what most people have,
Yeah.
to reflect on. Kind of wild.
Wild.
What are the daily it is to think that people still get a lot of their education just about life through television and film.
Yeah.
And trust that what they're seeing there is true, or what they need to build the vision of their life off of, instead of, if you think about not that long ago, people were using their imagination. They were reading books and using what they were creating in their imagination as to the ideal outcome of experiences they had with people.
Totally.
So I think there's opportunity to blend the both again. So are there any daily habits right now that are really supporting you for manifestation?
Yes. A lot. So every month I actually renegotiate what my daily habits are. And it just is so that I can lean into who that archetype is and lean into that word of the month.
Yeah.
If that version of self is showing up free spirited and is that magnetic light, what are those daily habits that they're doing every single day that, back into those very rituals and back into that exact way of being? And sometimes I find that I have daily habits that really just are a through line throughout my life, like physical movement every single day, time just for being quiet and introverted and kind of being with myself. But that tends to kind of change too, right? So this month I have my daily morning meditation practice, but I'm doing specifically a lot of affirmations and kind of like aura resetting. So really, really kind of, I've noticed as I, want to take this late summer and go into fall, I've noticed like I've been really craving a bit of, achieving some of these larger manifestations, achieving a bit more of an up level of self. And so I'm really padding that with a lot of affirmations. I'm padding that with a lot of, taking that time to tap into that creator source, tap into that version of self that I know can really, really achieve those larger things. And so it takes a lot of mindset prep. And I think being before you become it, seeing so that you can believe it. And so I find that working within meditation and working within that realm is really working within the quantum. And that helps me to kind of shrink those timelines. So I love that. I would say meditation is everything in that sense. Then another one is I have jotted down that I do a daily stress jug emptying. So think of your day as a jug or a water cup. And with every little thing that's maybe asked of you, someone stressed you out in the parking lot at Trader Joe's, right? Like all these little things accumulate and water is filling up into your stress jug. Some days you'll have less, some days more, but every single day I do kind of this intentional emptying of the stress jug at the end of my day. And that can look a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's physical release of, physical movement. Sometimes that's intimate connection with my partner. Sometimes that's, really allowing myself to breathe deep or end my day on a nice long walk so that I'm just like closing the day out and bringing in the evening. So I have that on my feel good checklist. And then what else do I have? Currently, my movement practice looks like 1 walk a day plus 1 other physical workout. And then it's always really about nourishing through foods, nourishing through my energy and how I'm showing up for myself, showing up for others. And then another one on my feel good checklist, I've been working on my nightly routine. I've been doing some reading at night, about like 15 minutes of reading. And I would say for the past half year, I've been so obsessed with mouth tape. It's been a long time since I wanted to admit to myself that I might be a mouth breather. But since I finally did, I have never woken up with so much energy. I already wake up with a lot of energy, but I swear this nasal breathing has been such a game changer. So I do mouth tape every night.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Are there certain places that you keep turning to keep learning? Like where do you turn to? Who are your people? What are your books? What are your resources that really kind of help keep you moving and evolving?
Yes. So one of my favorite resources is I use this meditation platform. It's actually this girl's just kind of like meditation podcast on Spotify for free, which I love. And her page is called Purely Being. And I use her meditations every single day. It's just this perfect fusion of magic and just spirituality tethered to meditation that there's something about it that I just feel so aligned to. So I reach for her all the time. In terms of any sort of like, I really, one of my practices that I really do in some way every day is just connecting to source in some way. And so one of my favorite places to just continually learn, I mean, they're on my bedside table. They're like so worn down because I like read them so often. But one of my favorite books is A Return to Love. And another one, A Course in Miracles. I'm a huge fan of any of Gabby Bernstein's books, so I'm like constantly rereading pages of that on my Kindle. So I really find myself always kind of reaching back to these texts that remind me of what really matters and what really is going to fuel me and connect me to that higher self, that really, really deep intuition that I know I always constantly have connection to. And then on top of that, I always just, I'm looking at my bedside, it's like 400 books there. I always have just like good fiction books. And then I love podcasts, you guys. I mean, I'm a podcaster myself, but I listen to so many podcasts to really just constantly keep me learning. And some of them, my friends are like, oh, I would have never pinned you to be someone to listen to like so and so show. But I just am like all over the place with where I really like to pull information from, whether it's like Huberman going crazy deep on, you know, glucose and insulin, or listening to different founders' stories on, you know, other podcasts. I love that. So I really kind of collect and learn from so many different places. And then I also have to say, Whitney, like one of my greatest teachers and greatest sources of inspiration and always keeping me learning is just nature. Like, I know that sounds so wild, but I just am like, that will always be my greatest teacher, my greatest sense of peace.
Yeah.
And if I ever am like feeling tangled and confused and stuck and blocked, that is the first teacher and space I go to seek clarity and unwinding and perspective.
Yeah, I find the sun and water helps me immensely. And when I'm resisting the sun or resisting going in the water, I know that there's something there, right? That I
Yeah.
have to let go of. Like that's when I really have to push because if I don't want to be in the sun and I want to stay inside all day, or I don't want to go in the ocean, that there's something on me or around me or a mindset that needs to shift.
Yes.
Because as soon as I'm there, baking, allowing like the sun rays, which I feel like is the source, or getting in the ocean, which is immensely cleaning and clearing. You know, I often will draw like a salt bath. And then I'm like, why am I making a salt bath when I can just go to the ocean and dive right in and it's already prepared for me? Like
Yes.
nature prepared it for me. I just have to go. Um,
I love that.
so immensely healing for me too. But it's when the resistance comes up, I find it fascinating when I don't want to allow myself to be in it.
100%. Guys, I'm really glad you brought this up because I urge everyone to follow your resistance and not always abide by it. Even this morning, I had just been on vacation the previous week, so my movement routine was on pause, and I had a early morning class that I love to go to, and there was so much resistance, and I was like, oh, I know I need this extra just because, you know, that's when you can kind of get into the tune of really what you need. But I love what you say about salt water too. I mean, I always say when I go into a body of water, and it was sweet because I was just on vacation with my family, and my dad called me yesterday and he goes, I love what you said about getting in the ocean as being a total system reset. I almost feel like every time I get into a body of water, I'm like, let's just refresh, restart, control, alt, delete. Like it just
Yes,
is a
yes,
total
that is the
reboot.
feeling.
Yes.
And that is the feeling you get once you've pushed through the resistance. And that is going to be my biggest takeaway from my conversation with you today is I just exited a relationship and I found I had a lot of resistance against talking about what I needed emotionally, physically, intimately. I was scared to say what I wanted and needed. And so therefore I didn't get what I wanted and needed.
Yeah.
And I needed to have pushed through the resistance of having the uncomfortable conversation. And I'm now really excited for the opportunity to present it again because I'll push through the resistance, knowing that either way, I'll get an outcome that'll be better than the situation I'm currently in, right?
Yes.
So it's like when we're sitting on the beach and we're resisting going in the water, but we're melting. If we just push through, no matter what, we're going to get a better outcome, you know?
Yes.
Like there's just so much relief on the other side of the resistance. So this was a great reminder to me to push through all the uncomfortable conversations because it's always going to turn out better in the end.
Yes, yes, it always will. And um, it's, especially when you're having conversations about intimacy, um, it's fun to almost approach it as less of a blame game because it's so easy to point fingers and be like, you're not doing this, or this isn't working, or da 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 da. And I really love the idea of kind of sometimes wiping that slate clean and being like, okay, listen, we both clearly have some like hurts here or needs that aren't being met. What does actually co-creation look like for us? And starting from a place where you're like, oh, okay, this is what I could use. Okay, this is what you could use. Okay, what does this roadmap for us together look like instead of us following some prescription that someone else told us to do? So yes, I'm so with you and I'm so aligned on this idea of like really creating your life to work for you in a non-prescriptive way, in a way that is co-creating with you, whoever else is involved with the universe. So it just can be so playful and yeah. I love it.
Drop the mic, sign me up. Let's go. That sounds like a perfect life. Let's adopt that for the rest of 2024, please.
Let's do it.
Let's just remind them, where can they connect with you and keep learning from you, listen to you, share all the places that you would like for people to find you?
Yes. Okay. So I would say the best place that you can connect with me is the Bedside podcast. That's honestly where you're going to just be getting the most like raw, fun, real, relatable conversations every week on Wednesdays. And we'll be, pending on when this episode comes out, we are going to be, right now I'm in the midst of a little summer break, but we're going to be kicking the show back off very soon. So you can connect with me there. In the meantime, I'm over at the Bedside on Instagram and TikTok. And then if you head to thebedside.co, you can explore the monthly manifestation journal in the process. You can pick up a journal yourself if you're interested. But yeah, mostly the Bedside podcast. That's where we just have so much fun.
Perfect. I really could chat with you so much longer and dive deeper into our conversations. Like, this was so much fun. So I really appreciate your time.
Oh my gosh, of course. It was such a treat. Thank you for having me on. And I likewise could chat with you for so long. There's so much we just touched on and kind of touched out of. So happy to chat anytime.
I know. Yeah, I mean, because when you started talking about how there's an entire chakra dedicated to our sexual health,
Yes.
yet we spend so little time talking about that chakra. And here we are on the High Vibration Living podcast. So that was like a huge shift for me. So thank you. I think this is a topic that we'll keep exploring. And
Yes.
I look forward to chatting with you more.
Of course. Oh my gosh, anytime. There's so much there, Whitney. Like, I feel like first off, there's so many instructors that pass through that area or don't acknowledge it. You can, that's really just the source of so much like tantric sexual manifestation in and of itself. So there's so much there we can we can get into. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat.
Yeah. I'll get caught up on some of your podcast episodes first, and then we can loop back around.
Totally. I love it.